There are two words that build your entire life, and you say them all the time without ever thinking about the weight that they carry. The two words I am. Whatever you put after those two words, that becomes who you are. And not because it's true, but because you said it enough times that your mind started believing you and quietly building an entire life around it. And most people are walking around today living out a story that they wrote when they were young and scared, and they never once stopped to ask whether it's even real. So let me break this all the way down, and I'll use my own life to do it, because I've lived this one from the inside. Welcome back to the Self-Discovery Files. This is episode 38, and today we're going to be diving into the story that you tell yourself. Okay, and like I said in the intro, whatever you put after the words, I am, that becomes who you are. And let me explain how that works. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it in yourself or in anybody around you. All right? Here's how it actually works. The strongest force in you isn't willpower. It isn't discipline, and it isn't even desire. It's the need to stay consistent with how you see yourself. Okay, your mind wants, more than anything, for your actions to match the story that you carry about who you are. It craves that consistency. It feels safe. And it feels dangerous, almost threatening, to act in a way that contradicts your own self-image. So whatever you believe about who you are, your mind will quietly work to keep it true, even when the story is the exact thing that's hurting you. If you tell yourself, I'm not good with people, you'll walk into a room and act in the exact way that makes that true. You'll be closed off, you'll wait to be approached, you'll leave early, and then you'll go home and think, see, I'm just not good with people, never realizing that you created the evidence. If you tell yourself, I'm not the kind of person who follows through on things, you'll find a way every time to prove yourself right. Not because you're weak, but because your brain is running a script. And the only job of that script is to stay consistent with itself. The story you tell yourself isn't describing you, it's programming you. And then your mind spends the rest of your life working to keep that story true in the background. And that's the part nobody understands. You think that your beliefs about you are reports. Like you're just observing the facts of who you are. They're not reports, they're instructions. Your mind takes them as instructions and goes and builds a life that matches that. Let me give you my own example, because this is where it stops being a concept and it becomes real. Okay? When I was younger, there was some water activity, some sport, something everyone was supposed to try, and I was scared of it. Not because I actually hated water, that had nothing to do with it, but I was scared that I didn't want to fail at it in front of people. Okay, I was scared of failure. I didn't want to be the one that looked stupid, or who couldn't do it, or who got embarrassed. So I said something small to get out of it. I said, I'm just not a water person. I don't really like water sports. And that was a lie to cover a fear. A tiny one. No big deal, right? People say stuff like that every day. Except here's what happened. I never did it. Not that day, not the next year, not ever, to this day. Because somewhere along the way, that little thing I said to protect myself from being embarrassed for 5 minutes, it stopped being an excuse and it quietly became me. I said I'm not a water person enough times to enough people that I started to believe it myself. And once I believed it, I lived it. And the fear that I felt one singular time as a kid became a permanent standing fact about who I am as a person. And here's the part that really gets me when I think about it now. It's not even that I was lying about my experience anymore. Okay, I was lying about my own belief. And I believed my own lie. Okay, that fear turned into a story. The story turned into an identity. And the identity turned into my actual life. And I never once went back and checked whether the original thing was even true. That's how it happens. It's almost never one big dramatic decision. It's one small thing that you said to feel safe in a singular moment, and then you spend years, sometimes your whole life, living up to it. And I want you to notice something about that because it's very important. The story didn't just cost me one activity. That's what makes this dangerous. When you accept an I am not about yourself, it doesn't stay in its lane, it spreads. I'm not a water person is small on its own, but the machinery underneath it, the willingness to let a fear write a permanent rule about who you are, that doesn't just run once, it runs everywhere. The same kid who says, I'm not a water person, grows into someone who says, I'm not a business person. I'm not someone people are drawn to. I'm not the type who takes risks. Same exact mechanism. A fear dressed up as a fact about your identity, quietly closing a door that you never then walk through again. One small story you tell to avoid one small fear teaches your mind a method, and it'll use that method on everything. So the water thing was never really about water, okay? It was about learning young that when something scares me, I can just make it part of who I am and then I never have to face it. And that's a very comfortable, very quiet way to shrink your entire life without ever noticing you're doing it. And this this is kind of the picture that made the whole thing click for me, and I'm going to give it to you right here. Okay? Think about how they train an elephant. Okay? When the elephant is a baby, they tie it to a post with a rope. And the baby elephant pulls and pulls and pulls, and it can't break it. It's too small. It's too weak. So eventually it stops trying. And it learns one thing deep down: this rope holds me. I cannot break it. There's no point in even trying. And then the elephant grows up. It becomes this enormous, powerful animal, thousands of pounds, that could snap that rope without even feeling it. Right? Could walk away anytime it wanted. But it doesn't. It never even tries. Because it's still running the belief it formed back when it was small and weak. It is held in place its entire adult life by a rope it outgrew years ago. And the only thing actually keeping it there is a story in its own head. You see, most people are the grown elephant, held back by ropes that they could snap in a second, but held there by a belief that they formed when they genuinely couldn't. You know, you tell yourself, I've never been a social person. I've never been someone who could do that. And maybe that was true once, right? Maybe when you were 16 it was completely true, but you are not who you are or were at 16. You grew and you changed. You got stronger, smarter, more capable. The rope that held the younger you cannot hold the person you are right now, but you never test it. You just assume the rope still holds because it held last time you pulled, and last time you pulled was 10 years ago, so you stay tied to the post, living down to a limit that stopped being real a long, long time ago. And actually, there's there's a name for this in psychology. Okay, they call it belief perseverance. Okay, which is essentially the tendency to hold on to a belief even after you should have let it go. Right, even after all the things that made it true isn't true anymore. And we do this constantly. Right, we defend the old story about ourselves harder than we defend almost anything else that we own, because it's not just a belief at that point. It's become part of who we think we are. And challenging that feels like being asked to stop being yourself. So, where do these stories even come from in the first place? Because nobody's born just telling themselves them or running them, right? And here's what I think, and I'll be honest that it's just my read on it. Underneath every one of these stories, okay, at the very bottom, there's a fear or an insecurity or some weakness you didn't want anybody to see. And at some point, usually when you were young, you took that fear and you turned it into a story as a way to protect yourself, right? For me, I'm not a water person, protected me from the risk of failing in front of people. I'm not good with people protects somebody from the risk of reaching out and getting rejected. I don't really care about that anyway. That protects somebody from wanting something and not getting it. The story is armor. That's what it is. It's a shield that you built to keep yourself safe from a specific hurt. And here's why it stuck so hard. A lot of the time you learned it young because back then it actually worked. It kept you from getting hurt. Sometimes it got you approval or sympathy or an easy way out that nobody questioned. Sometimes it was even how you felt loved or how you fit in or how you kept your own peace. So your brain almost filed it away as useful, and it kept using it in the background automatically for years. And years after you stopped needing it, it became a deep habit. And your whole life quietly organized itself around it, and you don't even remember the day that you first picked it up. Your limiting story usually isn't the truth about you. It's just the scar tissue from something that scared you once. And scar tissue doesn't grow, it just stays exactly where the wound was. And I want to name something honest here, because this is the part that keeps people stuck, even after they can see the whole thing clearly. Okay, and the old story is comfortable, right? That's the trap. Even when it's hurting you, it's familiar, and familiar feels safe. As long as you keep telling yourself, I'm just not that kind of person, you never have to try. And if you never try, you can never fail. The story protects you from failure by making sure you never even attempt the thing. It's a deal you made with yourself. I'll give up the possibility of ever having this in exchange for never having to risk failing at it. And that deal feels like protection, but it's actually a cage. Because the story that keeps you safe from failing also keeps you from everything on the other side of the attempt. Every version of your life that required you to try, the story deleted all of them and told you it was just being realistic about who you are. The story that protects you from failing also protects you from everything you could have become. That's the price. And most people pay it without ever seeing the bill. So how do you actually rewrite this? Right? Rewrite this story, because that's the part that matters, and it's the part that I actually have some standing to talk about. Okay? And I'll be honest with you, I've done this. The stories I told myself when I was younger, that I would never be social, that I'd never be the kind of person that people were drawn to, that I couldn't do certain things. I don't run those anymore. I rewrote them. So I'm not telling you this as a theory. I'm telling you this because I did it, and I know it's possible because I'm living on the other side of a few of those ropes right now. Okay, here's how it actually works, and it's probably not what you'd expect. It's not a mindset trick. Okay, you don't sit in your room and you think yourself into a new belief, because the story doesn't live in your thinking. It lives way deeper than that, down in your identity, and you can't argue with it from up in your head. You've probably tried, right? You've told yourself, okay, I'm confident now. I'm a social person now. And, it didn't hold, because saying it doesn't make it real. The old story just looks at the new words, right? You have to act your way out. That's the only door. You have to act your way out. And it starts small, right? And it takes a specific kind of bravery, not the, big kind, but the very subtle kind, the kind where you notice that you're scared. You actually catch yourself in the fear in real time, and you decide to do the thing anyway. That's the whole move right there. Okay, recognize the exact moment that you're about to let the old story win, the moment you're about to say, that's just not me, and back out, and then you step over it. Do the thing that the story swears you can't, because here's what happens when you do. You get exposed to something new. You do the thing you always said you couldn't, and one of two things happens. One, it goes fine, or two, it goes badly and you survive it. And either way, this is the key, you now have evidence that contradicts the story. You did the thing. The story said you couldn't, and you did. And that's a crack in it. And then you do it again, and there's another crack. And enough evidence, enough times, and the story finally breaks. The rope snaps. And you stand there realizing It was never as strong as you thought. You just never actually pulled against it as the person that you are now. You don't rewrite the story by believing something new. You rewrite it by doing something new and letting the proof change your mind for you. That's the order that people get backwards. They think they have to feel confident before they act. It's the reversed. You act first, scared or whatever, fearful, and the confidence comes after, built out of the evidence, right? You do the brave thing badly and then a little less badly, and one day you look up and, I'm not that kind of person. That's not true anymore, and you can barely remember believing it. And there's one more thing that I want to add because it's the piece that makes this, stick instead of being just a one-time breakthrough. Okay? Every single day, you are casting a vote for who you are. Not with your words, but with your actions. Every time you do the thing that the old story says you can't, you cast a vote for the new story. And every time you back down, hide, make the excuse, say that's just not me, you cast a vote for the old one. And the story that wins over time is just the one that got more votes. So you don't have to overturn your whole self-identity story in a day. Okay, that's too big, and that's why people give up. You just have to win the next vote. Okay, do the one small thing, one small brave thing in front of you right now. And then the next one. You're not trying to become a different person in one big leap. You're just trying to outvote the scared kid who wrote your story a long time ago. One action at a time until the tally finally flips. You are voting for who you are every day with what you do. And most people don't even realize that they're in that. So, here's what I'm going to leave you with, okay? Go find one of your I am not stories. Okay, one of the ropes. I'm not the kind of person who blank. Whatever came to your mind first while I was talking, that's almost certainly the one. That's the one that's load bearing. And ask yourself the honest question, is that actually true? Or is it just something you decided a long time ago? Back when you were smaller and more scared, or to protect yourself from something that hurt. And have you ever, even once, as the person you are today, actually reached out and tested whether that rope still holds? Because you might be a grown elephant tied to a post you could walk away from any time you decided to. The story that you're living isn't a fact about you. Okay, it's a script you were handed or one you wrote in a scared moment and forgot you wrote. And the whole point, the thing I most want you to walk away knowing, is that you're allowed to write a new one. You always were. You just have to stop pulling like the small version of you. And instead, pull like the one you actually are now. Okay? So, I have nothing left. Thank you for listening to episode 38 of the Self-Discovery Files. If you haven't followed me on the podcast, follow it on whatever platform you're listening on. You'll get updates every single Monday at 12 p.m. Eastern when I drop a new episode. Follow me on Instagram and TikTok at TheDylanPhipps. And I'll see you next week for episode 39.